When I was 10, my dad and I went turkey hunting in Pine Ridge Reserve, a sprawling, dense forest that stretched for miles. It was one of those places that felt untouched by time, towering trees, rugged trails, and an eerie silence broken only by the occasional rustle of wildlife. My dad, a seasoned hunter, always told me nature was unpredictable, but that day, we found something neither of us could have imagined. We had parked our old RV at a small, isolated campsite, about a mile from the main road. It was a quiet spot, nestled among the pines, and the perfect base for our hunting trip. After setting up camp and having a quick lunch, we decided to scout for hunting spots along a trail that led to a bluff my dad remembered from a previous trip. He said it offered a great view of the valley and would be an ideal spot for turkey. The trail started off uneventfully. The forest was alive with the sounds of chirping birds and the crunch of leaves underfoot. About half a mile in, we noticed a few blood splatters on the ground. At first, it didn't seem like anything unusual. Could be from a deer or some other animal, my dad said, his voice steady as always. Nature can be messy. I nodded, trusting his calm demeanor. But as we went further, the blood trails became more frequent, and the splatters larger. A sense of unease crept over me, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to seem scared. About another quarter-mile up the trail, we stopped dead in our tracks. Hanging from a low branch of a massive oak tree were 3 dogs. They had been skinned, gutted, and bled out, their lifeless bodies swaying slightly in the breeze. I felt my stomach churn. My dad stepped closer, inspecting the scene with a grim expression. "This isn't right," he muttered under his breath. His usual calm was replaced by a tension I had never seen before. He glanced back at me. "Let's keep moving. Stay close." We continued up the trail, but now every sound, a snapping twig, a bird taking flight, felt ominous. My dad's hand hovered near the hunting knife strapped to his belt, and I clutched the strap of my small backpack tightly, trying to suppress the growing fear gnawing at me. Finally, we reached the bluff. The view should have been breathtaking. The rocky outcrop jutted out over a sea of green treetops, with the afternoon sun casting golden rays across the valley. But my eyes were drawn to the ground. Symbols had been burned into the dirt, intricate patterns I couldn't understand. They spiraled and intersected, like something out of an ancient text. Candle wax was scattered everywhere, hardened pools and strange formations. Blood streaked the ground, still fresh, its metallic scent faintly detectable. My dad's face turned pale as he scanned the area. "We're leaving," he said firmly. There was no discussion. He grabbed my hand, and we started back down the trail at a brisk pace. The forest, once serene, now felt oppressive. The trees seemed taller, their shadows darker, as if the entire forest was closing in around us. By the time we reached the RV, the sun was dipping below the horizon. My dad locked the door and drew the curtains, his movements quick and deliberate. He didn't say much as he set his rifle within arm's reach and double-checked the windows. His unease was contagious, and I felt my own anxiety spike as I sat on the small couch, staring at the locked door. That night, the forest came alive with sounds. Every creak of the RV's frame, every gust of wind, felt amplified. I lay in the small bunk, my eyes wide open, straining to hear beyond the thin walls of the RV. My dad stayed up, sitting at the table with the rifle across his lap, his posture tense. Around midnight I heard it. A faint shuffling sound outside. My breath caught in my throat as I listened, my heart pounding. My dad must have heard it too because he stood up, moving quietly toward the window. He peered out through the curtains, his face illuminated by the dim light of the RV's overhead lamp. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice low but firm. He grabbed the rifle and stepped toward the door. My heart felt like it was going to explode as I watched him slowly unlock the door and step outside. The cold night air rushed in, and for a moment, all I could hear was the rustling of leaves. Minutes felt like hours. I wanted to call out to him, but fear kept me silent. Finally, he returned, his face unreadable. He locked the door behind him and set the rifle down. "Nothing there," he said, but his voice didn't have its usual confidence. He sat back down, his eyes fixed on the door. The rest of the night passed in tense silence. Every sound felt like a potential threat, every shadow a lurking danger. When dawn finally broke, we packed up and left without a word. My dad didn't stop until we were miles away from Pine Ridge Reserve. We never talked about that night again, but it stayed with me. The skinned dogs, the symbols, the blood, it all felt like a warning, though I'll never know what for. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that we weren't alone out there, that someone or something had been watching us. The forest, once a place of adventure and tranquility, became a source of unease. And the RV, once a symbol of freedom, now feels like a fragile barrier between safety and the unknown. I was driving solo through Nevada, heading from Reno to Las Vegas. I took the lonelier route through the desert to avoid traffic, and the isolation made it peaceful, at first. The vast, ochre landscape stretched before me, punctuated only by the occasional Joshua tree silhouetted against the impossibly blue sky. My old RV, affectionately nicknamed the Wanderer, rumbled along, a comforting presence in the echoing stillness. The peace, however, was short-lived. A grinding shudder ripped through the Wanderer, followed by a sickening lurch. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died, leaving me stranded on a desolate stretch of Highway 95, miles from anywhere. My phone, useless against the stubborn refusal of the cell towers to acknowledge my existence, showed no signal. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at the edges of my calm. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, a breathtaking spectacle that did little to soothe my rising anxiety. The desert air grew noticeably colder, and the silence, once peaceful, now pressed down on me like a physical weight. I tried everything I could think of, checking the fuses, the fuel line, even attempting a jump start with my near-dead battery, but nothing worked. The Wanderer was firmly planted, refusing to budge. Just as despair began to set in, headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the gathering darkness. A beat-up pickup truck, its paint faded and scratched, lumbered towards me. Relief, so intense it almost hurt, washed over me. A man emerged, tall and gaunt, his face etched with lines that spoke of sun, wind, and hard living. His eyes, however, held a disconcerting glint, a flicker that suggested something far from benevolent. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice rough as dry gravel. "My RV broke down," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. "Happens," he said with a shrug that didn't quite reach his eyes. "This road, it's got a way of swallowing people whole. No one ever leaves this road," he added, a strange emphasis on the last three words sending a shiver down my spine. Despite the prickling unease, I felt desperate. "Could you help me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze unnerving. "I could," he finally said, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across his face. "Come on, I'll take you to my place. We can get you fixed up." His offer felt wrong. My gut screamed at me, a primal warning that resonated louder than any rational thought. But the isolation, the cold, the fear of being alone in the vast, unforgiving desert, they all conspired to override my instincts. I climbed into his truck, a decision I would later regret with every fiber of my being. His place turned out to be a dilapidated shack, hidden away in a gulch off the main road, far from any sign of civilization. The air inside was thick with dust and the cloying scent of stale beer. He offered me something to drink, lukewarm, flat beer, and I forced myself to take a sip, feigning normalcy. As the night wore on, the illusion of helpfulness crumbled. He displayed no interest in fixing my RV. His hospitality morphed into something sinister, his smiles becoming predatory. He started talking about other travelers, about how easy they were to handle. His casual cruelty and the strange, knowing look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't some kind of desert Samaritan, he was a hunter, and I was his prey. This wasn't just about fixing a broken-down RV, it was a trap. A meticulously crafted snare for lost and vulnerable souls like me. He was part of a gang, luring travelers into the lonely stretches of Highway 95, trapping them for human trafficking. He had been waiting patiently for someone to fall into his deadly embrace. I had become that someone. The moment he made a move, a violent surge of adrenaline coursed through me, overriding fear with a desperate need to survive. I fought him with a ferocity I never knew I possessed. It was ugly, brutal, a desperate struggle for my life in the dusty confines of his squalid home. I used anything and everything as a weapon, kicking, scratching, biting, until I managed to break free. I ran blindly into the darkness, the pounding of my heart a deafening drum against the silence of the desert night. I didn't look back, didn't dare to slow down, until I stumbled upon the main road, weak and bruised, but alive. A passing truck stopped for me. A kind woman with tired eyes took me to the nearest town, and from there, to safety. The wanderer remained on Highway 95, a testament to my brush with death. I never saw her again. The memory of that night, the chilling words, "No one ever leaves this road," still haunts me, a stark reminder of the terrifying reality that lurks beneath the surface of seemingly empty landscapes. The desert can be beautiful, peaceful, but it can also be lethal, a place where darkness finds its victims easily, and only the strongest escape. My family rented an RV for a trip across Wyoming. We pulled into a quiet campsite near Laramie, far from any city or town. The place was isolated, a scattering of RVs nestled amongst ponderosa pines, a vast, stardusted sky our only neighbor. It felt like the perfect spot to relax, a balm after weeks of frenetic city life. My husband, Mark, expertly leveled the RV. The kids, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Tom, squealed with delight as they explored their newfound mobile kingdom. That night, things took a disturbing turn. It started subtly. A creak, a slight shift in the air, followed by the disconcerting click of the RV door unlocking. We triple-checked the lock, the heavy deadbolt firmly in place. Mark dismissed it as the wind, a natural occurrence in this remote location. But it happened again and again, a slow, deliberate unlatching that sent a shiver down my spine. Each time, the door swung open just a crack, revealing only the inky blackness of the Wyoming night. When we woke up, the subtle unease had solidified into something far more sinister. Lily and Tom were huddled together, their faces pale with a terror I'd rarely seen in them. "Mom," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "There was a man in the window. He was watching us." Tom nodded, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Yeah, a tall man. He was just there." Mark scoffed, attributing it to a shared nightmare, a product of their overactive imaginations. I wanted to believe him, but the lingering chill in the air, the unsettling feeling of being watched, refused to subside. Later, while packing away breakfast, I happened to open the rear compartment beneath the bunk beds, a space we'd used primarily for storing bulky hiking equipment. Inside, tucked away amongst sleeping bags and backpacks, I found a tattered photo album. It was old, the pages brittle with age, the photographs faded but unmistakably clear. The album depicted a family, a mother, father, 2 children, a girl and a boy, eerily similar in age to Lily and Tom. They were smiling, posed in front of various backdrops, a snowy mountain range, a bustling city street, a beach. They looked happy, normal, familiar. The unsettling part wasn't their resemblance to us. It was the complete absence of any identifying information. No names, no dates, nothing. Just a series of idyllic snapshots, frozen moments from a life that felt disturbingly close to our own. That's when the unease morphed into something akin to dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that this family's story was somehow intertwined with ours, their presence subtly woven into the fabric of our Wyoming adventure. Mark, initially dismissive, grew increasingly concerned as I recounted my discovery. He started investigating, rummaging through the RV's dusty drawers and cupboards. He found an old registration tucked away in the glove compartment. The RV had been registered to a Samuel and Clara Jenkins, a family who had disappeared without a trace over 15 years ago. Local news archives revealed a chilling account of their vanishing, the last sighting being at a remote campsite near Laramie. An internet search revealed more details. The Jenkins family RV had been discovered abandoned months later at a campsite strikingly similar to ours. Samuel Jenkins' body had been found inside, the cause of death undetermined. The circumstances surrounding the disappearance remained a mystery, a cold case that had haunted the Laramie Sheriff's Department for years. The pieces clicked into place. The creaking door, the children's story of the man in the window, the unsettling familiarity of the photographs, all pointed towards the Jenkins haunting presence. It wasn't a ghost, not exactly. Samuel Jenkins' spirit, possibly bound to the place of his death, seemed less likely than another explanation. Someone was watching us. Someone who knew about the RV, about the missing family, about its history. A knot of fear tightened in my stomach. We were intruders in this place, unwitting participants in a story we didn't understand. The unsettling feeling of being watched hadn't abated, it had intensified. I could almost feel eyes on us, piercing the darkness surrounding the RV. We packed frantically, the morning light revealing a sinister stillness in the air. We didn't wait for the sun to fully rise. We drove away as fast as we could, leaving the unsettling photographs and the chilling memories of that night behind us. We never looked back. Even now, years later, the memory of that night near Laramie remains vivid and unsettling. The mystery of the Jenkins family continues to haunt me. We left before morning, but I'm sure we weren't alone that night. Someone was there, watching us, lurking in the shadows. And the chilling truth is, I still don't know who or what it was. On a road trip with friends, we stopped at an old gas station along US 6, just outside of Salina, Utah. It was a small, rundown place, with a gruff old man behind the counter. His face was a road map of wrinkles etched by sun and years of hard living, a face that seemed to permanently wear a scowl. The air inside smelled of stale gasoline and something else, something faintly metallic and unsettling. We refueled our beat-up Subaru, the kind of car that screamed, "College students on an adventure," and went inside to pay. Liam, the ever-optimistic one of our group, was the first to notice. "Guys," he said, his voice laced with disbelief, "my wallet's gone." We checked our bags, our pockets, retraced our steps, but it was nowhere to be found. The only place it could have possibly been lost was the gas station. Reluctantly, we returned. The old man, whose name we later learned was Silas, was still behind the counter, polishing a chipped mug with a rag that looked older than the building itself. "Excuse me," I began, trying to keep my voice even. "One of my friends thinks he lost his wallet here." Silas didn't look up. His gruff silence stretched, punctuated only by the rhythmic scratching of the rag. Finally, he grunted, a sound devoid of any empathy. "Didn't see nothin'. Liam, usually jovial, was starting to get agitated. "We were just here, sir. It's got to be somewhere around here." He gestured vaguely around the cramped space. Silas's eyes, pale and unsettlingly bright, finally flicked up to meet ours. His gaze lingered on Liam, cold and calculating. "I told you, I didn't see nothin'. Now get out." His voice was low and gravelly, a threat thinly veiled in a gruff tone. His demeanor shifted. His hostility was no longer subtle. The change was palpable, a sudden shift from irritated indifference to outright menace. We pressed him further, mainly because the thought of letting this go felt wrong. Maybe a misplaced wallet was a small thing in the vast emptiness of the Utah desert, but losing your ID, credit cards, and driver's license out there was a nightmare. That's when he slammed his fist on the counter, the chipped mug jumping. A glint of metal flashed beneath the counter. He pulled out a revolver, the weapon looking surprisingly clean and well-maintained contrasted against the grimy surroundings. "I said get out!" he roared, his eyes blazing with an anger that felt far too intense for a simple accusation of theft. We backed away, a silent agreement passing between us. This wasn't just some grumpy old man, this was something far worse. The sudden, violent shift had given me a chill that had nothing to do with the desert air. We fled, the image of that gun, and the chilling glint in Silas's eyes, seared into our memories. That night, huddled around a crackling campfire at a distant motel, the pieces started to fall into place. Liam remembered a beat-up pickup truck parked down a dirt road behind the gas station, its windows dark and obscured by overgrown bushes. He remembered seeing fleeting glimpses of shadows moving around, and hearing muffled sounds. He initially dismissed them, chalking it up to the desolate location. But now, paired with Silas's violent reaction, the image of the truck seemed to resonate in a different light. We found internet access at the motel. We typed in, "Missing persons Utah US 6" and "Selena." Our blood ran cold as we looked at the news reports. Faces of missing people stared back at us from the computer screen, most of them young adults who'd vanished near the same stretch of highway. The reports spoke of a series of unsolved disappearances near deserted gas stations. One story mentioned a gruff old gas station attendant, never apprehended. The gas station wasn't just a place to refuel. It was a front, a carefully constructed trap. Silas wasn't robbing people for petty cash. He was luring travelers, preying on their vulnerability in this isolated stretch of highway. The metallic scent we noted earlier, it was the scent of fear, of something far worse than a simple robbery. The shadows and sounds Liam witnessed, they were more than just random sounds. The chilling realization hit us. This was a human trafficking ring. The missing wallet was just a distraction, a way to lure victims inside where they could be dealt with, out of sight from the highway. We were lucky. Very, very lucky. We had stumbled into a predator's den and escaped with our lives. We reported our experience to the local sheriff, but they were skeptical, claiming that the old man was just a grumpy regular who probably lost it. The lack of concrete evidence, no missing people reported right after our encounter, no witness besides us, and the remoteness of the gas station made them less willing to pursue our claims. Their dismissal fueled a sick feeling in our stomachs, knowing that this man could potentially get away with this. The memory of Silas's face, that cold and calculating gaze, continues to haunt us. The road trip that started with excitement ended with the chilling realization that the seemingly ordinary can hide unimaginable darkness. We learned that day that the open road, seemingly full of boundless freedom, can hold terrifying secrets, and sometimes, the scariest things aren't the ghosts of the past, but the very real monsters inhabiting dusty, forgotten corners of the world. We haven't been back on that road since.